I'm putting this up front here. I had debated about switching one of the posters out for one of my Sailor Moon posters because there's going to be Sailor Moon references in this video, even though it is a One Piece video, because I'm me. Um, Also, Sailor Moon shirt. And this will make sense because I'm going to be talking about the Gorosei today, or at the very least, the Gorosei in a bunch of the senses of the real world information that they are based on, in regards to names and positions and things like that. And then I will have a separate video, which will be up next week, where I talk specifically about like the history of the Gorosei and like kind of their influence in the story so far. Because both of those in one video would be a lot. So time for this. Also, I don't know if anyone's heard about this. I would hope some of you have. There was a baby giraffe born at a Tennessee zoo that had no spots, and it's adorable, and I want to hug it, and there's a competition to name it. So, there's voting to name it. So, I don't know. It looked adorable, and I love giraffes. That has no bearing on this video, but I just wanted to point that out. So, although by the time this goes up, the giraffe may have already been named. We'll find out. So, in regards to the Gorosei, or the five elder stars, or the five elder planets, as we've kind of more learned what they represent, we get a fair amount of an information dump within, several chapters ago when we finally got all of their names. I mean, we got a little bit of that information dump when we got, like, J. Garcia Saturn's name. But we got, like, a good bit of information dump when we got all five of them, along with their respective positions within the government in regards to what they are the head of, or the warrior god are, or the godhead of, or however you want to put it. So, and some of the information that I am using here is stuff from the Library of Ohara, so I will put that link in the description down below. Along with just other information that I found on the Wikipedia for it. So, in regards to, of course, Gorosei, we've kind of, since the beginning, we know it referred to the five elders, is what it was, originally translated to set up, but it was originally the five elder stars, and it just got shifted to the five elders, and then now we know it's more representing the five elder planets, because, of course, within Japanese, sei for planet and star are the same word, because it means heavenly bodies that are not the sun or the moon, which is something a lot of us have learned about about what that translates to in the last several months. So there's that. We also know that the five elders, each of their quote-unquote last names or family names, seem to be a representation of one of each of the five planets that are closest to the sun, not including Earth. So that would be Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And of course, because I'm me, as I've already stated, there will be Sailor Moon references in this video. Because, of course, all the different Sailor Scouts are named after the different planets, and, they all represent a different planet, except for Sailor Moon, who represents the moon. And Earth is technically represented by Tuxedo Mask. So does that mean that Im Sama is Tuxedo Mask? I don't know. I doubt it. I don't think Darien would ever blow up an entire island. Just to be vindictive. I would hope not. But, so we've got a lot of information about them very recently in the manga in regards to the fact that, well, they've been around for like 800 some chapters, and we finally got their names. 700 to 800 chapters, and we finally have their names. It's like we're just referring to them with fan nicknames for the past, 15 years or longer. So we get a lot of that. We know that they are referred to as warrior gods in one of the just straight translations. The Viz translation also just goes with Godhead. But part of the setup for it is that the Japanese, the kanji for warrior gods is Bushin, which then is very similar to what the historical term for a government official serving in the military and war meant. So we know that the Gorosei are kind of this representation of, very high-ranking heads of government. Within the United States and within lots of other countries, there's generally the one person who is technically the head of the government. In the US, it is the president of the United States. And then the president has their cabinet, which has like the secretaries of state and defense and agriculture and education and different things like that. And then each of them have these different agencies that are underneath them that they are in charge of, and then they report back to the president. Or some variation of that. They still take orders from the president, but they then report back to the president with new information. The president also has lots of other people that give him other information, which within the context of the One Piece world, which would be kind of very similar to the president, and then the Gorosei are all there, and they all represent these different facets, like, finance, defense, agriculture, environment, stuff like that. And they each have their own area that they all mainly take care of, but they probably all consult with each other. The different secretaries within the cabinet of the United States also do the same thing. Same thing with in the UK, they have the prime minister, and then they have other ministers that are underneath them that help with taking care of these different areas that they are specifically in charge of. And lots of other countries have the same setup or a very similar setup. Even within the UK, there is still the monarchy, which they do technically report back to the monarchy, but it is a constitutional monarchy. And other countries have a very similar setup as well, where they do have a constitutional monarchy. Japan does have a monarchy, but they're not particularly involved in government as much as they used to be. But they are still somewhat involved in government. But there is still the Prime Minister of Japan and stuff like that. And several other countries all over the world have a very similar setup. And I've made the comparison before that while all of the different kings and queens that gather for reverie are very similar to the United Nations, the Gorosei are actually something that is referred to be similar to the World Security Council, or the UN Security Council, which is kind of these 5 great nations that were part of the setup for when they were first setting up the UN back in the 1940s after World War II. And those ones are France. I can't talk, I know my countries. France, the United Kingdom, Russia, China, and the United States. And the 5 Gorosei are somewhat supposed to be a representation of that, where we know that while the kings and queens at Reverie can make their own decisions and stuff like that, they can pass different measures and stuff like that, and they can affect the world that way. We saw this with the abolishment of the warlord system, and with things in regards to the Fishman Island decision. We also know that the Gorosei technically probably could have nixed that if Im-sama didn't wish for that to be allowed. If Im-sama was like, no, I want to keep the warlords. They entertain me. As opposed to, no, it's fine, get rid of them. I'm fine with this. They've served their purpose, and now we have tiny warlords with wings and tans and lasers. And they're slightly more obedient. Slightly is a loose term there with the seraphim. But, the Gorosei do have this kind of where they are yes, they are the highest authority within the world, but they do still have to answer the Im-sama, although the public as a whole does not know that. Although we now know that Dragon, Sabo, and Ivankov are aware of this, but we'll find out how quickly that information gets out. And then, of course, as I stated before, each of the elders is named after a different planet as part of their name, or a pun of that planet's name is within their name. And of course, within Japanese, the planets have slightly different names than what they are in English. So they had to come up with a good English translation variation for it. So this next section is going to be me going through each of the different Gorosei and kind of going over the real world influences that they represent. The planet, in regards to both English and Japanese, namesakes, real world people that they seem to be referencing or inspired by. and certain things like that. So first up, we get the one that we actually got the first full name of. We have Saint J. Garcia Saturn, who is the warrior god or godhead of science and defense. So, in regards to planet information, first, Saturn is of course the sixth planet from the in the solar system in real life. So it's the sixth planet from the sun, and it was named after within Western setups. It was named after the Roman god Saturn, and fittingly, the Japanese term also includes, star and planet and everything like that within the name. But the way that it is said in Japanese, the Japanese name for Saturn is actually Dosei, which is Earth planet. And that kind of just, as is with, English and stuff like that, the planets have different representations. Saturn is generally described as a god of time and also agriculture. Whereas with, Saturn within Japanese, Dosei, it is much more described as this Earth planet. Probably just because of like the color of the planet for as best as they could see way back then. And then, of course, as other heavenly bodies were discovered in regards to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which is, of course, the basis for the names of, Poseidon, of the different ancient weapons, of course. And then, of course, Luffy represents the sun god. So we get that information. In regards to Saturn or Kronos within Greek mythology, that is, of course, the god of time as well as agriculture. There's different debates in regards to like the translations in Greek in regards to Kronos and variations of god names there. And this is where we're going to get a first Sailor Moon reference here. So in Sailor Moon, there is a Sailor Saturn, and she is not one of the original Sailor Scouts. She is introduced later on, and she is actually referred to as the Sailor Scout of Destruction, meaning she has the ability to destroy an entire planet or an entire solar system, should she activate her power. And we see this power demonstrated a couple of different times. She also has a double-edged blade ability where, like, if she kills someone, she will die as well. And that is also what happens if she uses her destruction power. If she activates it, yes, she will be able to destroy whatever it is she's trying to destroy, but she will die in the process. So it's like, it's a self-destruct button that kind of ends me as well. This is demonstrated a few times throughout the course of the series. But I also find it, the thing that I find the most hilarious about just these comparisons between like the Gorosei and the Sailor Scouts, because I'm me, is that there's not really much, comparison there to be made. I mean, technically, yes, Saturn currently in the story is off dealing with Egghead and is about to, is like, part of this, war siege setup that is happening at Egghead currently. And, he just unleashed Kizaru on the island. So it's like, okay, that is a power of destruction that he holds. But he's the god of science and defense, the war god of science and defense. He's not the one of war itself. That is Warcury, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head. So it's like, okay, that's interesting. Please, dear God, I hope someone makes fan art of the Gorosei dressed as the Sailor Scouts for their respective Sailor Scouts. Because, admittedly, all the Sailor Scouts could quite easily pull off the outfits that the Gorosei wear. Whereas I don't think that the Gorosei could quite pull off the outfits that the Sailor Scouts wear. In regards to additional for real-world people that Jay Garcia is partially based off of, the Jay Garcia's, full name or his first name could be a reference to Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, who passed away a while ago. He also looks slightly similar to the character. Also, because I'm me, there's also technically a reference there to the Cherry Garcia ice cream that was made by, and is still made by Ben and Jerry's. That is a playoff of Jerry Garcia. Also, Saturn's appearance mainly could be a reference to the Italian general, and I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize. Giuseppe Garibaldi. I apologize for anyone who's Italian and knows how to pronounce that. I'm sorry. He is considered one of the founding fathers of Italy. Prior to World War I, there was a bunch of stuff going on in Europe, of course. There were different revolutions that had happened throughout the 1800s, and he was part of that. Also, his clothing design is very similar to, and facial hair to a degree, is very similar to what Jay Garcia dresses as and looks like. So that's what we get there for Jay Garcia. Moving on to St. Marcus Mars, or the war god of the environment. Not as much here, mostly because his name isn't particularly all that hard to figure out. So Mars is, of course, the fourth planet from the sun within the solar system, and it is, of course, Keisei in Japanese, which is the fire planet. And of course, Mars within, for the solar system that us Westerners are used to, is of course a reference to Mars, or Ares within Greek mythology, the war god, which is both the embodiment of courage and bloodlust. Because of course, Ares, Mars slightly less so, but very much the Ares counterpart, is very much bloodlusty and bloodthirsty, and very much, ooh, I want to go kill something right now. I want a war. War gods don't tend to do well in peace times, but it depends on what else is going on around them. Funnily enough, so the name Marcus, which is his given name, is also a variation of Mars, and it is also derived from the name Mars. So both of his first name and his family name are both based off of Mars. So it's like Mars. What I also looked at in regards to Marcus, was like, well, okay, there has to be something that's an additional representation here. So I was like, I just Googled Saint Marcus to see what anything would pop up. And there was a Saint Marcus. Saint Marcus Ermitia, sorry, or Mark the Ascensi, or Marcus the Asriti, I can't pronounce that, I'm sorry. Catholic saints and saints in general are not my area of expertise. I'm Lutheran. We technically don't do saints, or at least not to the degree that the Catholic Church does. But so there is a Saint Marcus, and I just wanted to look him up. I couldn't find what he was the patron saint of. Sorry, but there is a Saint Marcus. I just figured, well, there has to be some other reference here beyond just, oh, his name's Mars, basically. But in regards to the Sailor Moon reference here, again, because I'm me, there is, of course, Sailor Mars. She does represent fire. As I said, Saturn represents destruction within the Sailor Scouts. Mars does represent fire, which makes perfect sense considering the fact that, Mars within, Keisei, fire planet. That makes perfect sense. Also, fire is one of the elements that tends to be associated with Mars or Ares in regards to the god setup of that. And surprisingly enough, going through and learning stuff about the Gorosei explains a few things in regards to stuff with Sailor Moon that you thought I would have known by now, or it would have been something I was more familiar with. But it's like, okay, well, that explains a little bit more as to why that would still be the same way there. But then it also just adds on additional, context for stuff for me as well, which I just find interesting. within Sailor Moon, Mars does have like prophetic powers. You know, she has like premonitions and visions and stuff like that. I don't necessarily think Saint Marcus has premonitions within One Piece. If that was the case, I don't know. Things may have been different. He is also the one that tends to look like Gandalf, is what he gets referred to as, or Gonfal's brother. Um, so there's not really much there with Marcus. He is the god, warrior god of the environment, so he is most likely he's in charge of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. That's what he's in charge of. He takes care of those things. He's probably having a whole giant PR debacle right now in regards to the giant flippin' hole that opened up in the ocean now, where there used to be a Lucia kingdom, and it's not there anymore. And now water is rising all over the world. And there are earthquakes. So he's probably having a fun time trying to figure out how to spin that one. Next up, we have Saint Topman Mercury, warrior god of justice. Topman. I'm sorry, I still find that hilarious. So, of course, Mercury. The name is based off of course, Mercury, and which is the first planet in the solar system, one closest to the sun. And the, Curie, variations of that are also part of Japanese pronunciation of Mercury in English for like how it looks when you, basically write out Mercury in English into Japanese for how that's done. So there's, a variation there. Of course, Mercury or Suisei is, of course, water planet in Japanese. Again, Mercury, and the odd thing is that in Greek and Roman mythology, while Hermes is the messenger god and the god of wealth and blessings and merchants and thieves alike, so Mercury and Hermes were just kind of like a catch-all when it came to a lot of different a lot of different things that gods needed to be representations of. But Mercury within English with Hermes and stuff doesn't really have a whole lot of like water connotations, while Mercury within Japanese, of course, Suisei has, of course, a lot of connotations because it's the water planet. There's not really too much else with that in regards to the Sailor Mercury side of things. Sailor Mercury is, of course, she does have water powers, but she kind of has like bubble and ice powers, but they're still kind of like water based. She is also exceedingly smart. So Mercury is considered, Amy within the Sailor Scouts is considered to be, I believe she's supposed to be the smartest of the Sailor Scouts. Pluto is also pretty damn smart, but Mercury is, I believe, considered to be the smartest out of all of the Sailor Scouts. Which I guess would have been interesting if she was actually, if like it was actually paired with like the warrior god of like, technology or something like that, would have been interesting there. But of course Mercury has, water and ice powers and stuff like that. Sailor Neptune within the Sailor Scouts also has water powers as well, and also is slightly prophetic. But there's a difference there. They have different forms that the water takes. So, variations there. And in regards to a specific real world person that Mercury seems to be in referencing an appearance is, of course, the late Soviet president, Mikhail Gorbachev, which, of course, if you're American, you're very used to hearing the clip of Reagan going, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," in regards to trying to end the Cold War and bringing down the wall in Berlin. So there's that reference. They also, we kind of figured he was based off of Mikhail Gorbachev for a long time, just given his appearance in general. And he has a very, Mercury has a very similar, birthmark on his head that is very similar to what Mikhail Gorbachev had. Mikhail Gorbachev died several years ago. I don't remember exactly when he died. But they have a very similar appearance there. And Top Man doesn't really seem to be a reference to anything that I'm familiar with. I don't really know if there's a reference there. I mean, a lot of people point out he looks like the the Monopoly Man, so there's that. But there's not really too much else there. Now we get into Saint Ethan Baron V. Nos Joro, warrior god of finance. He's got a lot, so this is going to take a minute. So, of course, Nasu Joro. There's a very interesting way that they had to set this up because variations of how you would translate that into Japanese don't really work very well. So they had to be like a bit of, okay, well, how can we adjust this here? Because within Japanese, Venus is Kinsei, or metal planet, or gold planet. It's also because that's part of where that comes from as well. So Kinemon, gold. Want to work, fun. And also that attends with him being the warrior god of finance, because gold and that and everything. But in regards to the way that they had to translate his name to make it work, so Nasu, I believe, means eggplant, or Nasu means eggplant in Japanese. So technically eggplant is part of his name, and the V is the only other character setup that we found in One Piece that's not like a D clan member, like, Monkey D. Luffy, Monkey D. Dragon, Monkey D. Garp, that type of stuff. V. Nosjuro, V is the only other one that we found that has like a middle initial. So I don't necessarily know if that's going to end up being significant, or if that's just like they needed to do something, and the only way to kind of make that setup for V. Nosjuro was to do it that way. And that may just be the way that it ended up being, that was just the best way that Oda and his editors and the translators found for how to do that, which is fair enough. So as I said, the Nasu means eggplant, and there's like, variations there for like how that name would work in Japanese and everything, and the Nasujoro and stuff like that, because like in Wano, there was Zorojoro, and stuff like that. So it's like there's a reference in there, and of course a lot of people think that maybe Ethan Baron has this connection to Wano. We also think he has the Sandai Katetsu, or the Nidai Katetsu, whichever one it is, the final one, the most powerful, the most ancient one, Katetsu blade. We think that he has it. That hasn't 100% been, confirmed yet, but if it ends up being confirmed, none of us are going to be surprised by it. We're just going to be like, yeah, we already knew that. That's not surprising, unless you're going to have something where there's like a zero Katetsu blade or something like that. That seems like something, I don't know, maybe Oda would do that. I'm not sure. But he seems to have the Katetsu blade, and given his, character design and clothing, since he's the only one of the Gorosei that's not in a suit, he could have connections to Wano in regards to like where for the V. Nasujiro family line came from. They may have a connection to Wano in some variation. I don't know. We'll find out. Hopefully. In regards to where English references come in. So Venus is, of course, associated with the goddess Venus, the goddess Aphrodite, who's, of course, the goddess of love and beauty and fertility and such. Within Greek and Roman mythology. I would assume that each of the different, the Roman gods, the Greek gods, probably have like some form of a counterpart within Japanese mythology. Like there is probably like a goddess of beauty and a god of war and a god of destruction and stuff like that within Roman mythology, or within Japanese mythology as well, because lots of different mythologies all around the world have very similar setups in that, where there's like a god of this and a goddess of that. But I'm just not sure exactly what the exact, correlation would be there for the exact connection. So of course, Venus is the goddess of beauty. So a lot of people had initially thought that maybe, the one that's like the youngest looking Gorosei is going to be the one that's like the one that's associated with Venus because of that. But of course, within Japanese, there's a different connotation there. Within Sailor Moon, they do play with that connotation because, of course, in Sailor Moon, Sailor Venus does have, love and beauty shock and love chain and circle and things like that are part of her, attack repertoire. And she is, of course, very beautiful as well. And they do kind of play off that because, like, within Sailor Moon, they were able to play off of, both like the, Japanese association with the planet setups, but also play off of the, Greek and Roman associations that go along with those gods and goddesses, and stuff. So, there's Sailor Venus there and such. Again, I still really hope someone draws. I don't know if someone did this or not, but I really hope someone draws fan art of the Gorosei and the Sailor Scouts with like outfit flips, because that would be hilarious. Um, um, and of course, in regard to real world representations, Nasujiro's design does very much resemble Mahatma Gandhi. By the way, something I probably should have known a long time ago, Mahatma is actually just it's a title in regards to like a religious leader. So Mahatma is not actually Gandhi's real name. That's just a title and that he is recognized with. He has an actual full name that I cannot pronounce. And of course, Nasujiro, Ethan Barron does very much looks very similar to Gandhi. That's why he, a long time in the fandom, he was referred to as Samurai Gandhi, because he has a sword and he looks like Gandhi. So, that makes sense. He was this, big leader and everything like that at the turn of the century in India and everything, doing hunger strikes and different things like that against the, the British government in order to result in India becoming its own separate country, which, has succeeded on some level. They are like one of the largest economies in the world. So, yeah. Although Oda has not specifically stated that he took that inspiration from Gandhi in order to make Ethan Barron. As I said, Ethan Barron is also the warrior god, or the godhead of finance. So he would be somewhat similar to like the Treasury Department within the U.S., or a variation of like a finance department that is in regards to tracking money and printing money, and different things like that, and like keeping an eye on like, probably different economies, not just of the world government itself, but of like the individual members of the world government. He's probably one of the ones that's very much in charge of making sure that all of the different heavenly tributes come in on time and that they're received and that everything, balances out correctly within the checkbooks. Yeah, that's probably what Ethan Barron spends a lot of his time doing. And then eventually he just gets so angry he stabs stuff with the sword when things aren't going the way that he wants it to. As I stated, the V for the V Nasujiro does seem to be the only other family so far, the only other person besides a member of the Will of the D clan that has that similar, middle initial. And then we have our last one, which is Saint Shepherd Jew Peter, warrior god of agriculture. Yeah. So, of course, Jew Peter is, of course, based off of Jupiter, which is, of course, the 5th planet from the sun. And in regards to the translations for, like, how stuff goes off, Jew in Japanese also is represented by a cross. So there's a connection there, of course, because Jew, Peter, Saint Peter, which I'll get to in a minute, and shepherd in that regard as well, have lots of connotations within like Christianity and stuff. So in regards to the Japanese version of the planet is Mokusei, which is wood planet. So there's probably the connection there for why it's, the warrior god of agriculture. So, because wood, agriculture, wood, plants, trees, that type of thing. But that could also tie back into like, environment, but still. Agriculture and environment, while very similar, do have their separations, but they are also sometimes very dependent on each other. Like with bees would probably be part of the environment, and bees are necessary to be able to pollinate stuff that would be in agriculture. Would be a way of putting that. So there is that. And of course, within Japanese, there are, of course, the 5 elements that are, water, fire, wood, wind, and metal, I think, are the 5 elements. I could be wrong there. probably am, but those are generally the ones that I think of. I also have the Hex Girl song Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air going through my head right now from Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. So in Greek and Roman, it is, of course, Jupiter or Zeus, which is, of course, the god of thunder. He is also the chief god of the Olympians, the head of the Olympians, the god king, king of the gods and everything like that. Also the one that cheated on his wife the most amount of times. Okay. So Saint Shepherd is like the youngest of the Gorosei, and I have like a whole theory that like I think at some point in time, Homing was actually possibly a candidate for the Gorosei, and then he left and everything because of what he learned, and then he decided to leave and didn't fit the bill anymore to be a Gorosei. And then I think maybe that's where Jupiter came in to play, because we don't know if like each of the different we don't know if these 5 members of the Gorosei are always specifically from these 5 families. It may be where it's just like, as the celestial dragon children are growing up, if one demonstrates some form of, this one has a skill with fighting, or this one seems to have a skill with knowledge, or this one seems to have a skill with this, let's try to cultivate that. They probably try to keep it within the same families, but also it could just be, the one that they find that seems to be the best fit for the ones that try to be the strongest. In certain cases, because of course we also know about the God's Knights that are involved as well, and that those are probably, with, Gari Figureland, that there are a lot of, probably very strong warriors there. Some of which may be related to Shanks. But they have like those warriors there. But then we've also seen like the typical celestial dragons that are like Charlos and his family and stuff. So, there has to be some pool that they're drawing from to like fill these different sections for the Gorosei. And they may all continue to be from the same family, or they may not be. But I would find it hilarious if the one that is a shepherd, if he just cheats on his wife a lot and she's just like over in the background going like, I can't do it. I'm done with this. I can't do this anymore. Sweetie, hi, honey. Just like, I can't. I want that to be some form of a reference there, just because of all of like, within Greek and Roman mythology, so many times, Zeus / Jupiter was like, unfaithful to Hera / Juno. I want there to be a reference to that in this somewhere. I really, really do. I really do. Which actually, that's a good segue into Sailor Jupiter, because within Sailor Moon, there's Sailor Jupiter, who is of course connected to Jupiter. And within the Sailor Moon context, Jupiter falls in love. Lita falls in love with almost any guy she sees that she thinks is cute. And it's a running gag in the series, but it's like, okay, now that there's the connection that I know much more about like Greek and Roman mythology and Zeus falling in love with almost every pretty girl, that makes so much more sense. And I really want there to be a reference to that within One Piece, that like, like Saint Shepherd has like a lot of wives and a lot of mistresses, or some variation of that he's the one with like the most kids. I really want there to be a reference to that, because that just sounds really funny. But like, yeah, that just makes so much sense that like, yeah, Lita just falls in love with so many of the guys she sees. I don't remember if she ever actually falls in love with Darien, or like, well, doesn't fall in love, but like gets a crush on them. I don't think she ever did that with Darien, because like, Serena and Darien were already were partially together at that point in time or so. But yeah, I don't remember exactly. She probably did when they first met, before Serena and Darien actually got together, or Sagi and Mamoru were officially together. But Jupiter, of course, Sailor Jupiter has, of course, electric attacks. She also has Jupiter Oak Evolution, which, now that I know that there's this representation, I believe the oak tree is actually one of Jupiter or Zeus's symbols within Greek and Roman mythology, but that does connect back to like the wood planet for Mokusei for Jupiter in Japanese. So I like that connection there. That was just something that now makes more sense to me now that I'm older. So in regards to on the Peter and the Shepherd part of the name. So of course, Peter within Jupiter is probably a reference to Saint Peter, who, of course, Peter, the denier and stuff like that within, Christian canon and stuff like that within the Bible and stuff like that, that he, denied God 3 times, denied Jesus 3 times and everything like that, before Jesus was executed and everything like that. So, there's probably some connotations in that. Peter is, I believe, also considered to be like the first pope within Christian Christian teachings within Christianity. I think he is considered to be the first pope. That, Peter the Rock. Side note, Peter, in regards to Peter the Rock, my dad's name is Craig, and part of the evolution for the name Craig is like a crag within a rock, and that is a reference to Peter as like Peter the Rock. So technically my dad's name can be traced back to Peter. Ironically, my dad's middle name also starts with a D, so my dad technically has the will of D. But yeah, in that regard. And then of course shepherd, and of course Jesus is the shepherd, and he sends the disciples to be shepherds of men. So there's a reference there and everything. Shepherds is also very much sometimes part of like connected with like saints and stuff like that, of course, because he sends the disciples out. And then of course part of the translation for like the kanji for like Jew Peter has like the cross in it. That is of course the Christian cross and such. I know that of course, there were, of course, Christian missionaries and everything like that were, of course, sent to Japan at various points in time. Certain cases they succeeded in trying to convert, Japanese and stuff like that. Of course, other Asian countries as well. And that there are still, that there are people in Japan who are Christian, and do have those same traditions and everything like that. I mean, like they celebrate Christmas, but yeah, a lot of people celebrate Christmas even if they aren't Christian. It's like, it's a reason for decorations and gifts and food. So yeah. So there is that. There's not really too much else there. I will briefly talk about what we have for like their, their possible devil fruit forms real quick. So of course we have, St. J. Garcia Saturn. Kind of looks like he turns into like, I don't know, a demon with horns. St. Marcus Mars does appear to turn into a bird of some kind, so there could be a reference there to it being a different, like a mythical version of like the Tori Tori no Mi, another variation of a mythical one like what Marco has, although it's not a phoenix. St. Topman Mercury, of course, has one that kind of looks like a mammoth, which would be, fairly accurate given the fact that he has like the giant mustache anyway. So those turning into like tusks would make perfect sense. And then we have Saint Ethan Baron Venus Joro, who seems to turn into a kind of humanoid looking one. That seems to have like, like the god ribbon on it that like, that we know like Luffy has and like, Yamato had and Yamato has and stuff like that. So there could be a connection there, that it's probably a mythical zone of like a god of some kind. And then of course Saint Shepherd Jew Peter just kind of looks like the Scream painting, in all honesty. Like, that's kind of what it looks like. So I don't know. He turns into the Blob. I don't know. He turns into one of the Silents from Doctor Who. That's what he turns into. And that's why we can't figure out what he looks like exactly, because we don't have enough context for that. So we'll see how everything comes out with that, with the silhouettes later on, whenever that gets explained to us, in the actual story. So that's what I have. As I said, next week I'll be going much more over the history of the Gorosei, because if I was also tagging on the history of the Gorosei in this video, it would be like an hour and a half long, and I don't want to do that. So it's already going to be like 45 minutes anyway. So that's what I have. I thank you very much for watching. I thank you very much for putting up with my Sailor Moon references. There will be more to come probably down the line with the Sailor Scouts and stuff like that, depending on what else we learn about the Gorosei and their powers. So I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!